I want to start off with a very simple question. Who do you listen to figure out Trump's foreign policy? Who? Who has the right?
I think you're better off just watching him in action than taking any specific remark. We know, first of all, he's coming out of a campaign which has its own share of sort of, emotionally laden or campaign-oriented rhetoric.
Right.
So just making that transition to campaign to government means you're going to have an adjustment there. But I would look at the actions. I'd look at Tillerson's trip, for example, and deduce from that.
But it sends complicated signals, though, Frank. I mean, because on the one hand, Tillerson and, of course, Pence coming out sort of much more conciliatory to their counterparts, and then you go back on Twitter, on Trump's Twitter page, and it sounds like he's looking for a global trade war.
No, I think you've got a fair point, Betty. I think if we look at the president's public comments or his Twitter feeds, what you're seeing, I think, is a president who believes in signaling the world community or signaling the market through his communication, setting the vision, setting the pace. Mm-hmm. And then you're right, he's leaving it to the actual diplomats and the people running the various institutions to actually work out the deal or work out the day-to-day elements of diplomacy.
Well, not just working it out, they seem to be blunting the force of them, though.
Well, I don't think there's a contradiction. I don't think you'll see Mattis or Tillerson saying something that is different or opposed to what the president's saying. But what they're trying to do is to take that kind of vision. For example, the president made repeated comments in the campaign and subsequently about burden sharing. Right, and Mattis and Vice President Pence both reinforced that point when they were in Europe last week. So they're, I think, being good messengers, if you will, in carrying out the president's policy. But how you say it and the context where you say it is going to differ. And a personal meeting with Angela Merkel, who's an important ally and a friend of the United States, is certainly different than how you'd say it in a Twitter feed.
It absolutely is, but I mean, if you look at what Mike Pence said about Russia, for instance, when he, as he's visiting, as he's touring through Europe, he's saying to the effect that the U.S. will hold Russia to account, which is very different in many ways to what you hear from Donald Trump and some of his aides, who are very strongly first in denial that they're in Russia's corner, but then at the same time don't want to criticize Russia either.
Well, I think they're anchors of a policy, and so the president is saying, is there scope for improving relations with Russia? He believes there is. Pence then, I think, correctly underscores the fact that Russia is currently in violation of its agreements. It is funding or supporting this military activity in eastern Ukraine. It is seized Crimea, sovereign territory of another nation, so it is not observing its international obligations, and the United States is going to hold Russia to that. So the point is, if there's some fundamental problems in the United States' relations with Russia, these are overwhelmingly the responsibility of Russia to adjust.
And Frank, I mean, for Asia, a lot of the focus is on that call between President Trump with President Xi Jinping and him, Trump honoring once again this one China policy. What do you make of that call? Does this really reflect his true position, or is he just kind of biding time right now and hoping for something in exchange of that?
No, I think that is an honest statement of view. And here's the point. That has been a cornerstone of U.S. Foreign policy vis-a-vis China for over 40 years, since the first Shanghai communique, the Nixon administration. So I don't think Trump has any desire to change that. But what I think he is also saying in the same breath is that we'd like to, from the United States point of view, we'd like to see some cooperation from China as well. And China's build out in the South China Sea doesn't contribute to stability. And some of those places where it's building out are contested territories. China's trade policy is widely perceived as unfair, at least in some respects. So there's certain responsibilities from the Chinese side as well.
So are trade tariffs pretty much likely then, Frank? And would China have to retaliate in some form? And how would that, impact some of the companies that you work for that do try to sell their products in China?
Yeah, I don't think tariffs are likely, but I do think trade moves front and center as a point of friction, if you will, in the bilateral relationship. And I think that the president, again, if we look at his campaign rhetoric and what he said subsequently, he sees China as not always playing fair, and there are a range of problems in the U.S.-China trade relationships, and he's going to tackle them. And he's also brought in some real China trade hawks into his administration. Not all of them have been confirmed yet, but I view there being some downward pressure or potential for U.S.-China trade friction as a rate that pretty high in the course of this year.